At this moment, one of the most legendary highways in the United States is being consumed by the ground beneath it. California's Highway 1 along the Big Sur coast is giving way into the Pacific Ocean at multiple locations at the same time. This is not an isolated landslide. It is a cascading structural breakdown stretching across nearly 60 miles of coastline, with more than a dozen collapse zones opening like fractures along the Santa Lucia Mountains. Families are stranded. Aircraft cannot operate, and the rainfall shows no sign of easing. Is California's coastline itself beginning to destabilize? What force is powerful enough to rip apart a roadway carved into sheer 1,000-foot sea cliffs? And why are scientists warning that the most severe impacts may still lie ahead? The earliest alerts did not come from satellites or aircraft, but from beneath the pavement itself. Caltrans sensors embedded along Highway 1 began detecting lateral ground movement that surpassed every predefined safety limit within the monitoring network. Engineers observing live data feeds watched displacement rates surge beyond anything seen in decades of recorded measurements. The instruments were functioning correctly. The land itself was shifting. But those numbers were only a murmur before the disaster escalated. Emergency response plans were triggered throughout Monterey County. Inspection crews sent to examine bridges and retaining structures discovered fractures expanding by the hour. Concrete was tearing apart along stress seams that had remained intact for years. The sensors had bought the minutes, not hours. What followed unfolded faster than any coordinated response could keep up with. What happened next stunned even veteran engineers. The first major collapse occurred near Rocky Creek Bridge, an area already weakened by earlier slides that had previously sent lanes tumbling into the ocean. Within hours, another failure erupted at Mud Creek, the same location where a massive landslide in May 2017 had buried nearly a quarter-mile of Highway 1 beneath more than 5 million cubic yards of debris. That earlier collapse, described by Caltrans as among the largest in California history and labeled catastrophic by the USGS, had taken 14 months and $54 million to repair. Now the same mountainside was failing once again. A third collapse followed, then a fourth, then a fifth. Each sent asphalt, guardrails, and entire sections of hillside cascading toward the surf below. The corridor from Cambria to Carmel deteriorated sequentially, as though the highway were being ripped open like a zipper from both directions. Caltrans ordered a full shutdown. Big Sur was severed from the outside world while slope failures continued to accelerate. Dozens of vehicles were left stranded on pavement that no longer connected to anything in either direction. In previous Big Sur events, as many as 1,600 people have been trapped simultaneously. With collapses occurring at multiple locations, this event threatened to isolate even more. Behind them, fresh debris flows sealed the roadway. Ahead, the pavement simply ended at exposed cliff edges plunging hundreds of feet into the sea. Helicopter rescue operations were launched from Monterey, but violent winds and near-zero visibility pushed pilots beyond safe operating limits. Coast Guard crews attempted instrument-only flights through mountain passes, extracting survivors from vehicles buried up to their doors in mud. In conditions like these, aerial evacuation becomes the only lifeline. Continuous bands of moisture streaming in from the Pacific turned every flight into a fight against a storm that refused to release its grip. Warning signs were spreading across the Big Sur backcountry. The sheer scale of destruction was overwhelming. Near the iconic Nepenthe restaurant, mud walls reaching 40 feet high poured down canyons, completely erasing the roadway. Hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of waterlogged soil were moving at once across multiple drainage systems. In the Ventana wilderness, entire mountainsides failed simultaneously, sending debris flows traveling miles downslope. Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park disappeared beneath a thick layer of brown slurry, so dense that first responders arriving by helicopter could not identify a single recognizable landmark. Trails, campsites, and creek channels vanished beneath a smooth, featureless expanse of mud. But the ground held a deeper explanation. The mountain failures were not caused by rainfall alone. They were driven by the immense weight of water pressing down on slopes never engineered to withstand it. Long-term USGS monitoring has shown that saturated soils are the primary trigger for catastrophic slope collapse along the Big Sur coast. Based on rainfall totals and field observations during this event, saturation levels appear to have exceeded anything documented in the modern record for this region. At peak strength, a single atmospheric river can transport moisture equal to 15 times the flow of the Mississippi River. and 3 of them arrived back-to-back. The first storm soaked the ground. The second overwhelmed drainage systems. The third found no way left for the water to escape. What no one anticipated was the timing. Research from the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at UC San Diego indicates that climate models had not projected atmospheric river sequences of this intensity until the 2030s or 2040s. Instead, these storms appear to have arrived more than a decade earlier than expected. Jet stream patterns guiding them showed disruptions consistent with rapid warming of Pacific surface waters. This suggests the feedback loop between ocean heat and storm intensity may be accelerating faster than existing models can account for, compressing the timeline for extreme precipitation along the entire West Coast. But scientific analysis could not keep pace with the unfolding human impact. In a cabin nestled among redwoods above the old coast road, Elena Vasquez pressed her children against the kitchen's back wall as the sound outside shifted from rainfall to a deep, grinding roar. Through the window, she watched the hillside above begin to move, slow, deliberate, like a wall of wet concrete sliding toward the house. The debris stopped just 14 feet from the front porch. Mud and shattered trees piled against the propane tank, sealing the only exit. For 36 hours, Vasquez and her 3 children waited in darkness without electricity or cell service, rationing bottled water and listening as the mountain creaked and groaned. "We could hear it breathing," she told rescuers when a Coast Guard helicopter finally reached them. When the slide stopped, the silence felt worse than the noise. No birds, no running water, only the smell of soaked earth and splintered pine. The family was flown to a shelter in Monterey, where hundreds of evacuees sat on cots, many still coated in mud. The cabin survived. The road did not, and the full scale of damage was only beginning to emerge. Institutions that defined Big Sur as a cultural destination fell one after another. Dietjen's Big Sur Inn, a historic landmark dating back to the 1930s, was evacuated as mud surrounded the property. Post Ranch Inn, perched above the Pacific, required emergency helicopter evacuation of guests and staff. The Esalen Institute, known worldwide for its hot springs and retreat grounds, was completely isolated by slides blocking both access roads. At Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park, slope failure near Muckway Falls reshaped the canyon wall. Scientists from the USGS Pacific Coastal and Marine Science Center documented sediment plumes stretching miles offshore into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Those plumes carried serious consequences. Sanctuary assessments had long warned that massive landslide sediment could smother kelp forests and devastate intertidal reef habitats, including endangered black abalone populations. Those warnings were now unfolding in real time. The economic collapse followed immediately. In a typical year, 5 million visitors travel Highway 1 through Big Sur, sustaining an economy almost entirely dependent on tourism. A 2025 Beacon economic study found that earlier closures had already cost the region $438 million in lost spending. Communities like San Simeon and Big Sur saw revenue losses of 42% and 20% during previous shutdowns. Now, with the highway destroyed at more than a dozen locations, restaurants closed, galleries boarded their windows, and family-run hotels faced permanent shutdown. Without the road, the economy simply stopped. No access meant no visitors, no deliveries, no lifeline. The damage rippled outward. Coastal farms were cut off. Dairy shipments halted. Crops spoiled and fields unreachable by trucks. Power outages spread as substations weakened by saturated soil and falling trees failed. Water treatment facilities switched to backup generators, while sewage systems risked overflow as floodwater infiltrated aging infrastructure. The road that once connected these systems was gone. Without it, modern life along the Big Sur coast began to unravel. What has changed is the climate acting upon a fragile landscape. Some scientists now argue that the destruction of Highway 1 is not an anomaly, but a preview. The USGS has identified 75 miles of the Big Sur coastline as among the most landslide-prone terrain in the western United States, with more than 1,500 documented slide zones. Cliff edges retreat landward at an average rate of 7 inches per year, with some sections losing nearly 2 meters annually. Highway 1, constructed between 1919 and 1937, was built through terrain that was geologically unstable long before pavement existed. Similar vulnerabilities extend along hundreds of miles of Pacific coastline from Washington to Mexico. Infrastructure across the region was designed for a climate that no longer exists. Scientists at the National Center for Atmospheric Research confirmed that warming oceans will produce atmospheric rivers that are larger, wetter, and more destructive. Stanford University research shows that successive atmospheric river events cause 3 to 4 times more economic damage than isolated storms. The cycle feeds itself, and it is accelerating. What remains unclear is whether any of this can be stopped. Highway 1 has been closed more than 55 times since its completion, almost always due to landslides. The storms of 1983, the 1998 El Nino, the 2017 Mud Creek collapse. Each set a new benchmark. Each has now been surpassed. Engineers face a brutal choice: rebuild at a cost potentially reaching billions, knowing the next atmospheric river could erase it again, or abandon one of the most iconic roads on Earth. Some propose tunnels. Others suggest limited seasonal access. A few voice the unthinkable, that the era of Highway 1 as a continuous coastal route may be ending. But the mountains do not wait for policy discussions. Another atmospheric river is forecast within days, with models projecting an additional 10 to 20 inches of rainfall. With more than 1,500 mapped landslides along this coast, dozens of additional highway sections remain at risk. The slopes that held this time may not hold again. What scientists do know is this: the Big Sur coastline is failing faster than at any point in recorded history, driven by storms arriving far earlier than climate models predicted. What they do not yet know is whether this 60-mile collapse represents a localized disaster or the opening chapter of a much larger reckoning with the forces reshaping the ground beneath our feet. The mountains are moving, the ocean is rising, and the road between them is vanishing into the sea. If the climate has already outpaced the models, what else has it left behind?